Welcome, podcast listeners, music lovers, and leaders, to another exciting episode of Growth Leaders, where innovation meets leadership. Today, we're thrilled to host Chris Harris, Spotify's Senior Director of Software Engineering. With decades of experience, Chris has been the driving force behind Spotify's ascent to global audio dominance. His expertise has kept the platform ahead in emerging trends like AI, making a powerhouse in the digital realm. A true leader and a learner, Chris exemplifies sustained success in the fast-paced tech world. Join us as we uncover the secret of his journey and tap into the mind of a tech visionary on Growth Leaders. Now, Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for that. Quite an intro. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to having you here. And as you know, and I told you before, I'm a lover of Spotify and all what you do. And you've been there now nearly 8 years, +7, nearly 8 years. So if you look back, what are the big highlights over these close to 8 years with Spotify?
Well, that's a tough question. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been fun. Spotify roughly 10x'd everything since I've been there, in terms of the size of the company, the impact we have. And when I started at Spotify, it was already an amazing company, and to see it grow so much over the years and to be a part of it was amazing. Another big thing I think has been the people there are quite something. There's really a great group of people. Brilliant, talented, but also very nice. Everyone's heart's in the right place. A really great team and group of folks to work with. In terms of accomplishments, the one thing I'll say is, when I started at Spotify, we were primarily what we would say curation first. Like, you came to Spotify because all the music was there and you could make playlists out of it, which is great. But over time, that started to become a bit commodity. You could go to other services and do the same thing. And so really transforming through recommendations and machine learning, and we say AI these days, to be sort of recommendations first. So Spotify will help you navigate all of the content that's out there, and really kind of be your trusted friend in the space, to help you find your next favorite band, or to give you great music to run to or to concentrate to or whatever. And that being a part of that journey was really amazing.
So, but as I understand, you have around developers, employees. So
Yes.
where have you, out of this journey, where can you see our team has made a big impact on this? I know it's a lot of people, but if you look at a little bit from tech development and not at least the thought process going in behind, I mean, this parts of this journey, could you see, is there some specific things which you see, that is really important, where we have contributed as a team, or where you also see, those are extraordinary moments for me?
Exactly. So our team, I think a big contribution that our team made. So what I'm accountable for at Spotify is the listening experiences. So the part of Spotify that I work in is in personalization, and specifically listening experiences is what we're accountable for. And this is all of the sort of playlists you think of on Spotify, from Discover Weekly to the AI DJ. And I think a big contribution that we made is really making that. When we started, it was a small part of Spotify. It was they were exciting. People loved their Discover Weekly when that first came out, but it was a very small aspect of what people do on Spotify. And now it's grown to be the majority of listening on Spotify is through Spotify recommendations. And so that really helps people find the content they want and really quickly get into a great experience. And a thing that we did as we grew the team is go from a few disparate ideas into really building an ecosystem of these playlists. So if you're trying to find something new, we have experiences for that. If you're trying to just find your favorites, we have experiences for that. If you want to start with your own playlist and have Spotify help you, we have experiences for that. So really trying to meet users and listeners where they're at and work with them in the way they want to work, but be there with recommendations to help them find great music, help them listen to something amazing.
I always get that from my wife. Where did you get that from? Well, it's Spotify. because I get my weekly updates and all that. And it's just all the music we like to listen to and so on. So I think that it's a hell of a journey on that. So how would you describe your leadership style? Have you
So
considered, if you try, or maybe I should rephrase it. So if I ask one or two of your employees right now, so how would they describe Chris as a leader?
and I mean, hopefully they would describe me as supportive, someone who listens. I often will joke, we've got 2 ears and one mouth, so you should try to do a little more listening than you do talking. I think so for me, I think of myself in the servant leadership style, which, I hear that term get used. But for me, what that means is really that I'm kind of there to serve. Like, I'm there to help people understand what matters to the company, or where we need to go, or what some of the roadblocks are. I'm there to ask the right types of questions. I'm there to ensure that we hire the right type of people and build the right type of team and give people the support they need to move things forward, and to listen, whether it's to ideas for what we can do in the product, or whether it's challenges that we may be having that are slowing us down, either technically or organizationally, and then try to be helpful and help us solve these types of challenges.
And that is all great. And how do you assure that you are on the forefront on, the tech development side? I mean, you can grasp a hell of a lot out of your organization, but still the real new stuff, where you have to go outside the boundaries, which Spotify has done, and I guess will continue to do, hopefully in the future. You as one of those leaders, so how do you work with that to give yourself input to create that environment?
So I think that's a great question, and it's always tricky. But again, the first thing I'll say is I don't think I'm smarter than my whole team, and so I really find that it's really smart to leverage both your team as well as your peers and colleagues and coworkers in terms of trying to listen to all of that knowledge. And you never know who's going to read the right article or be ahead of the right thing. And so trying to really have a sense for who in your ecosystem are paying attention to things, and if maybe you have a hole somewhere. So as we started to really lean into machine learning and AI, for example, you start to think to yourself, all right, am I reading the right things myself? But do I have the right people? Do we have the right people in the company? Am I listening to? Do I need to go outside the company to talk with folks who have an expertise that maybe we don't yet have internally? As we start to build that internally, am I talking to the right folks internally to get enough sense for what this means that I can ask the right types of questions? I can be pokey and really help dig in and ensure we're sort of thinking about this in the right way, and in a way that's going to move the company forward. And so I think it's really about making sure that you look for any blind spots you might have, and develop some way of filling them.
And I think you're talking from a true leadership perspective, because there's two aspects which you're really touching upon. The one is that you really have to know yourself. What am I good at? And where do I actually need to have the input, and all around? What kind of people do I need to have close by? The other thing is around the interesting of having that network, actually being really interested in people and knowing, yeah, I know that girl there. She has something which really interesting. You follow her or him, in distance, see what's happening and so on, and you can call in whenever it's needed. So, as you said, I mean, you've been on a tenfold growth pace with Spotify here. So, can you see or an experience where growth mindset, because it's a little bit different leading a company which is getting into heavy growth to a company which is downsizing or just having a moderate growth. So which has positively influenced your leadership during these years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that The one thing when a company is growing, I mean, it's been my experience, this always seems to be the case in the tech landscape, is that things are always changing. You don't really know what's going to come next. And as you're growing, that seems to be the case as well. You're hiring people, you're bringing new folks in. And so I think one thing I'll say is, having a growth mindset, you really need to be able to adapt to change, to whatever is happening. So you need to kind of be ready for anything. And willing to accept any outcome might work or might be possible. One, example that I think is an interesting one, just like a people example, is we had a leader at Spotify who, as we were growing, we needed to figure out how to grow our leaders and internally and bring people in, and when to make that decision. And at one point, we made a decision to bet on somebody internally, and it was a huge jump for this person from the role they were in to this really big leadership management role. And they struggled along the way. At one point, there was a lot of pressure really to make a change in the group. And what we ended up doing in this particular case is this person ended up going back and taking a smaller job, and we had to bring somebody externally in. And I think that could have been a very difficult moment for that person and for the team. But we all sort of accepted it and tried to lead through that change. And he had a chance through accepting that to really then build again his experience, and now he has grown again into a strong leader on the team.
That was a quite exciting example, and I must say, it is a rare way of doing it. I must say, but with a great dialogue with both the team and the individual, and you as a manager, then of course. It's a very good way to actually make sure, the learnings, the experience come along with the growing leadership responsibilities. Because one of the difficult pieces, as I see, when I look at, let's say you were growing now with 25 people, and you do that over half a year, let's say that. How do you secure to get those guys and girls productive? Because that ain't easy.
Oh, definitely not. And one thing I'll say is it's really hard to find great people. And so in the example I just gave, we had a person who clearly demonstrated strengths in a number of areas, very passionate for the company, knew a lot about what was going on, but then struggled in one area. And so rather than make a harsh decision, maybe to let somebody go or to go a certain way, you make a different decision and say, hey, how can we help this person succeed? We see a lot of really great things. It's very hard to find somebody this good. How do we help this person succeed? And so that's a case where maybe it took a different path than you might expect. I would say in general, when you're in a growth phase, you really do need to focus on, as you bring people in, what is your hiring process? How are you going to quickly get through and find the right people to bring in? And then what's your onboarding process? How are you going to help people understand? And even with onboarding, there's a number of things to consider. So the obvious one, tech, how are they going to come on board and be productive technically? But there's a lot of cultural considerations. How are we as a company? What types of things do we expect? How are we going to help you understand that? As well as people, you need to meet people and start to make a network and connections. Particularly at a company large, or on the larger side like Spotify, knowing who to talk to, starting to build a network of folks is super important. So helping somebody fairly quickly start to learn where do we fit in the landscape? Who are the people that you need to talk to? That stuff also is very important.
So when you bring new tech developers in there, do they get mentors which they can come to, or is it the immediate manager who is the mentor, or is it a combination on that?
Yeah, Spotify has a buddy system, and so your manager is going to be your manager. So they're going to be there helping you, and they have certain responsibilities. But you also get assigned a buddy, and the buddy is typically somebody who has a similar role to you or is in some way well connected to the things you need to be connected to, but usually maybe not a non-obvious connection for you. So it might be somebody even on another team or in a slightly different part of the company, but that's a strong partner that you'll work with. And the idea behind the buddy system, I think, is twofold. For the buddy, the person who's already at Spotify, have a chance to connect, to mentor, to help somebody new get started and get up to speed. And for the new person, they have a person they can call, right? Everybody is nice. Will answer the Slack if you reach out to them, but you know that you have a person who is going to be there for whatever crazy question that you might have, from who should I talk to about this, or how does this work, all the way to, sort of technical questions. And so I think that buddy system has been a great way of helping people on board.
And what you see with that, we call them a peer-to-peer system, buddy system, and it's actually a mentor system too. The guys and girls being buddies here, they grow as an individual also, because they have to take on some kind of leadership role in providing information. You should talk to that one and listen to that one, and so on, which really means that that's part of their career also, having those roles.
Absolutely. I think it's really helpful for both sides.
And when it comes to development of the employees, I understand they normally would need quite a fair amount of the latest in technology, that training, and many times they may have the interest by themselves. How do you get them into the soft skills side? I mean, some have that naturally, others don't, because we all know that soft skills or leadership skills are an important part of life.
Absolutely, very important, and I think sometimes overlooked. And so one thing I'll say is we have a process from interview on to try to think about that. So Spotify cares very deeply about the culture in the company and the type of people we hire. And so there's cultural aspects even of the interview process. And if someone isn't a cultural fit, even if they're great on the technical side, Spotify is not going to hire that person. And I think it's important to have that as a company. You have values that really matter to you as a company. And then I'll say when people come on, that's an aspect of what's expected. So even we have a framework called STEPS framework, which is how we think about career growth within the company. Even in that STEPS framework, there's a part of it that is about how you work with others, how you work with the team. Do you put the team first? Are you always thinking about yourself? And to really make sure that people are thinking about the values that the company has and how they're interacting with others. And one thing I'll add as well is even on the engineering side. So for me, my engineering team, we get together regularly. And as my team of engineering managers grew, and as our mandate has grown, I've suggested numerous times that, hey, maybe this group is too big. Maybe we should think differently about, is it worth everybody's time getting together? But I actually got a lot of pushback from the team, and they really wanted that time together. And so we found it was very valuable to have, even as our team grew a bit, time where everyone together, having that community of managers where we could help each other out. And we would use that meeting time for a number of things. Sometimes we'd have guests in, sometimes we would deep dive in technical topics, but often we would have sessions where we would talk about the softer side. Maybe we would have sessions where people would bring a challenge they're having. Oh, I have this problem with someone on my team, or I'm not sure how to handle this person, or can someone help me find a mentor for somebody? And we would bring that to the whole team, and you'd have all of these other like-minded people. Maybe some of them have more experience than you, or someone has solved that problem that you're having already in another time, and they're going to help you out. And really having that community to draw from has been amazing.
If you look at other tech companies and you would give some advice to new leaders, what would that be? I mean, if you take the top 3 things or 4 or 5 things, these are things I think you should focus on, to become a great leader.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Maybe not the easiest, but I know it's in there.
I mean, one thing I'll say, just building on what we've talked about, is I would say it is important to listen, and you need to listen to the business. So where is the business going? Where is the business headed as a leader? And I think so you need to understand what the pieces are. Where is the business headed? Where is the business going? What sort of tailwinds do we have that are helping us? What headwinds are slowing us down? And where might our tech challenges as a technical leader at least be able to help or maybe hurting us? So really understand the perspective of folks outside of your organization, business leaders and others. So I think that part's important. But then you also need to do the same thing with people your team or surrounding your team. So really understanding what is actually going on so that you can start to connect the dots. Oh, I've talked to business leaders. We need to grow in this way. I've talked to folks on my team. We're having these challenges. Oh my, we really need to solve these things if we're going to go in that direction.
How should we phrase that first point? So that is actually being aware from the business perspective and also the skills perspective, getting those two tied together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think of it as really listening and paying attention, but then thinking about how to make the right sort of connections so that you can focus. The next thing is, particularly as you're in a senior role, to be thinking long term. So you want to make sure that you have the right folks on your team to be dealing with the sort of shorter term things. You know, if there's a technical challenge or an issue or whatever, hopefully you have the right folks, and you should ensure that you do, to take care of those things. Your job, the more senior you get, is to be thinking further down the road. What do we need to be thinking about today in order to be where we want to be next year or in 2 years or in 5 years? I think it's important as a leader to be thinking a little bit strategically down the road. What seems like it's in the way? So an example of this at Spotify that I'll give is I mentioned that my team is accountable for listening experiences. And when we started, these experiences were built by a whole bunch of different teams, a whole bunch of different tech stacks, a whole bunch of different approaches. And they all worked really well, but there was a challenge for the company in this way. One is it didn't scale very well. So to build every one of these, you needed a whole team, a large team of people. And so that wasn't going to scale. But it also meant from a business perspective, you couldn't think holistically about how they all worked together. So, now when you come to Spotify, you might think, some people use this experience, some people use that, some people use 2, some people use 3. You want to be able to think holistically about all these things together. And do we have a hole here? And are we missing something for someone? How might we fill it? And that's difficult to do when you have different teams all over the company with different tech stacks building something. So you need to think a little bit about, hey, what are we going to wish we had down the road? Or what are we going to be able to, what are we going to need to be able to do down the road? And how might we start to get on a path towards that delivers value along the way, but heads us in the direction strategically that we need the company. So get your head around the strategy as best you can and try to think a little bit long term. What are the things do you think the company is going to need?
So those are two great advices. And if we look a little bit at Spotify, I'm a sailor too. So we can see in what areas have you already hoisted the spinnaker? It's full speed ahead. And what areas, without talking about confidential things here, what areas are out there where you've started to taking the course towards it, which is official, but we may not know. So the music is clearly one of them. But what else do we have here, which are important right now, where there's full speed ahead, and then other areas which could be of interest, which I'm certain is official also, but maybe not to everyone's knowledge.
So one thing I can say there is I think the Spotify has done a great job, I think, over the last few years of really transforming, as I mentioned, from being curation first, where users were expected to do all the work, you have to find everything, into a system where Spotify really does a lot of the work for you. I think the number is something like 85% of users, when asked, cite personalization as one of the main reasons why they choose Spotify and why they love Spotify. The reason that that's important is that was a strategic decision by Spotify to head in that direction. And now we're seeing the benefits of that. And I think connect to the question you're asking, which is, now that we have this, not only in music can we help, so we can go from the types of experiences we had to brand new experiences like the AI DJ, where Spotify is now talking to you and giving you all this context and really helping. And that's still very sort of music centric today. But it also has enabled Spotify to expand beyond music, which I think is exciting, into things like podcasts and audiobooks. And that's, all very new. And Spotify has been able to leverage the position not only of the company and users, but this sort of technical framework of being great at personalization and recommendations to really understand, is this a person who might like a podcast? And if so, what podcast might they like based on their music listening? So being able to bridge that gap and make that connection and really transform the company into something else, has really been very exciting. And I think that's sort of the new part of the journey that Spotify is on. Now that you're listening and you've got Spotify in your ears, what are the new exciting ways and what are the new exciting formats that Spotify can bring to the forefront?
Two of the big areas for you, that's the podcasting and the music. Is there other emerging areas where you have entered into? I don't know what it should be. I'm just trying to think. You see, things are moving in the market, etc., which you have announced or something like that.
Right. I mean, the other big one I think that I can talk about at least is audiobooks. Yeah. So audiobooks is live in many countries. Yeah, and that's another big thing for Spotify. And it's interesting because these things are all related in that they're sort of audio first experiences. It's been interesting because a lot of them have video. We say podcasts historically have been audio, but now people might expect to see people talking or see some video. And so there's the video aspects are really interesting to some of these things. And that's really a draw for people, helps them connect. But there's also a lot to think about in terms of how these things behave differently. So as an example, people listen to their favorite song over and over and over again, but people aren't typically going to listen to a podcast, 10 or 15 times. So they might listen to it once, maybe they go to a little section that was really interesting again. And so all of the ways the recommendation systems need to work have to change a little bit, depending on the type of content that you're dealing with. So, again, as we've been talking about, things that change and leveraging what but sort of being ready for the new evolving world that you live in, even down to things that aren't obvious at first. There's really a lot to think about in these spaces.
That's really interesting. And of course, if we take growth leaders as a podcast producer, we will of course then understand how those mechanisms is working, so we actually reach the right type of people, which are the listeners and that target group, which we believe will always. So now, when you look back, we have both been running big teams, etc., and I'm certain Mr. Harris has also done one or two wrong steps as a leader. Are there any experiences you would like to share as say, that was a hard lesson, but I learned I should not do it again? Is there anything you could come up to your mind around that?
Well, so one thing I'll say in that space, I mean, life is full of mistakes. Things often don't go the way you expect it to, but I do want to try to talk about something positive as well. And so one thing I'll say is, I think it's really important as a leader to, especially as a tech leader, to appreciate the people side as well as the tech side. And so I've mentioned a couple times here this transformation we made with listening experiences from multiple teams to one team. This was a massive change, though, internally, and we brought all of these teams together into one. We decided to make an organizational change, which was already a decision that we had to make. That was done sort of independently of the teams themselves. Leadership said, hey, we should bring these teams together. Then when we bring the teams together, now it's me and a bunch of teams. And we have to decide, how do we want to move this stuff forward? And so there's a number of technical, things that we want to do, but we also have all these people who think a certain way and maybe associate themselves with a particular team or a particular product or a particular way. One thing I'll say is, I recognize this going in. We have done it before, but at this scale, it really is not something to be underestimated. How much effort you need to put in to making sure that the people side of the equation, that people really understand why you might want to do a thing that you want to do, that they feel bought in and their voices are heard, that they really have an opportunity to speak up and say, but this is how it has worked, or this is really important to me, or I think this really matters a lot. You set a clear set of expectations around yes, we're going to hear voices, but in the end, we're going to make decisions, and we expect folks to perhaps disagree if you disagree, but commit to the decision we're making and be bought in and move things forward. And I think that we did a decent job of this, I'll say. Give ourselves, reasonable credit. But it definitely was interesting as I reflect back on it. Certain things that I thought would have maybe moved faster than they did took a long time to really get everybody on board and to get people bought in and to really have the teams not just bought in, but moving fast together in this new way. It took a little while to get, slowly get some people on board, and then some teams start to work this way, and then little by little. So I think that if there's advice in there, it's to not underestimate the people side of the equation when you have any kind of big change that you need to make.
Yeah. So what you're addressing here is really one of the absolute fundamentals in change management, which of course is part of any leadership development journey. But it's quite clear also. I usually take the example that you're sitting, running, going with the train, and you go into that long tunnel. And I mean, fairly soon, you're at least going to see the light over there. But all the other guys and girls sitting on the back, they won't see anything.
And you go on this journey yourself. Like, you think about all the different things, and you thought this and that. And so you go on this journey, and then you get to a place where you're like, I think this is what we should do. But maybe everyone hasn't gone on that journey yet with you, and maybe they have to take their own path to get somewhere very similar.
Yeah, it's really black for them. And the only way to handle this is communication, is people communication. And as we know, there's a lot of philosophies, how you divide different people into different boxes. Some see the visions, others need to see the details, which means you actually have to be able to in a good way, to have the team come along early on. This is where we're going. I mean, there may be changes down the road which we haven't seen, but this is where we want to do it together. It is super important. Well, I think this is great. I love talking to you, Chris, and what you have accomplished and your insights. We can also see, I mean, the experience with the time you are thinking. It's not only now with people, but you also have all the senior thinking of long term ahead, which actually make impact not today, but makes impact tomorrow and the day after. Great. And thank you for being part of Growth Leaders and being part of our podcast here. Wish you all the best moving forward.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It was great.
Thank you.